just because of
Live streaming is on.
I'll tell you later. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. As always, I am your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator, and the Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am joined by my co-host,
Ryan McKinley, vampire author, general skeptic, and paranormal interest.
the Scully to my Mulder.
Something along those lines.
Which makes you the girl, I might add.
Yep.
But tonight is Kevin let Brian choose the topic. But I think it's a good topic because we're going to be talking about magical thinking. Brian can keep people involved while I do the usual post.
Okay. Well, I guess it makes
Why
sense.
don't you start by defining magical thinking, actually?
Exactly what I was going to do. I figure we start at least with a basic definition of what we're talking about so people understand. So, magical thinking generally is a psychological term that describes when people genuinely, or sometimes even not so genuinely, believe that the supernatural or cosmic forces have some kind of extraordinary effect in their life, or that their actions have a outsized effect on the world around them. Such a good example would be, the step on a crack, break your mother's back. If someone actually had enough superstition or belief that if they were to accidentally step on a crack in the pavement, that some kind of injury would befall, their mother, and therefore they avoid stepping on cracks. People who avoid going under ladders because they think it brings, bad luck, or shattering a mirror, brings bad luck. Things like that. Stuff that rationally we know there's no reason to believe that this is actually true, but some people firmly hold on to these superstitions and ideas and ways of thinking nonetheless.
I would agree completely. Although, just for the record, I think a better example that's very common. Okay, I don't know about my audience, but in general, if you aren't one, I bet you know or are related to one. How many of you know a sports fan? And how many sports fans have to wear a specific shirt or pants or underwear? Because if they don't, their team won't win the game.
Yeah.
You see it a lot in gamblers in particular. Gamblers are deeply superstitious people.
Yes.
It's this idea that if I do X, it will cause Y, which is actually the root of a lot of superstition. Yeah. Although, granted, it's very interesting, I think, from a sociological and historical perspective, and a practical perspective, that there are usually deeper reasons for why things are supposed to be bad luck that people think of as bad luck. The explanation I've usually read for walking under a ladder is the ladder forms a pure triangle, essentially. And triangles have a great deal of significance in math and certain types of magic. So by walking through it, you're breaking that symbol. Cats, particularly black cats, are associated with witches and demons. Yeah. So if one crosses your path, it could be a witch or demon that might decide to hex you. Does this make these beliefs? I'm not arguing that these makes this belief more rational, but there's certainly more thought historically that goes into these superstitions than simply it's bad luck, which is the way that modern people tend to see them. There's a chain of cause and effect.
Oh yeah, there was always a reason that started the superstition in the first place. They don't just come out of thin air, unless of course you happen to suffer from like an obsessive compulsive disorder, in which unfortunately in that case your brain will come up with weird rituals and fears to, irrational fears to give you, and rituals that you need to perform in order to stop them from happening. But that's a separate that's a separate disorder. That's not just regular magical thinking. But
Yeah, and we're obviously not here to condemn anyone. And hello, Chris Palermo. I'm sorry because I'm probably butchering your last name. I've had a wonderful weekend. I hope you have as well. Finally had after the first few times back, nobody's said much in the chat. We finally had somebody, so I felt the need to respond.
oh, sure.
And I will say, I think, let's face it, magical thinking is a serious problem. I mean, even as someone who openly believes in supernatural and preternatural forces, I think while your definition is 100% correct and accurate, that if you look up magical thinking on Wikipedia, it's what you just said, so you're factually correct. But I think for the purposes of this episode, there's a broader sense in which we mean it that we should be talking about, and I think you agree with me. Mm-hmm. Because it also, I think, is a good way to shorthand belief in spirits, belief in tarot cards, belief in astrology, and all of these other beliefs that people have gathered that don't, you don't have to indulge in magical thinking by the traditional definition to believe in ghosts. That doesn't, I'm not trying to say that validates belief in ghosts. It's just there's different ways to get there without that kind of fallacy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll grant you the ghosts, just because honestly, I've probably talked to and met a couple dozen people in my life that all have some form of ghost story that they claim to have witnessed, or is part of their family, or happened to somebody they know. So there's enough what you might call soft evidence for the existence of something that we perceive as ghosts, that you could be a strict rationalist and still realize that, well, there's got to be something there, because this many people all over the world can't all be this delusion.
Teresa Hall, another one of our regulars who also happens to be in chat, points out she has many ghost stories. I have a lot of ghost stories. Ghost stories, I mean, we have records of ghost stories as long as we have written records. Babylon and Sumeria, the oldest written sources in the world, have ghost stories. In fact, shameless plug for somebody I want to try and get on the show at some point, although I haven't tried to reach out to. There is an excellent book called First Ghosts that you can find on Amazon. It is by the curator of the British Museum. So, pretty decent source, a guy by the name of Irving Finkel. Called it The First Ghosts, the most ancient of legacies. And it's an analysis of Babylonian, Sumerian, and other ancient world views on ghosts. It's funny. It's a lot of fun. It is an academic work. He's citing his sources and going back to original tablets and things like that. But I gotta say, for an academic, he's relatable. He's funny. He's actually a really good source. I'd recommend checking him out. And the thing is, people have believed in ghosts as long as we have record, and I think there's more than enough reason to argue that before there were recorded history. In fact, I would argue that there is reason to believe that people have believed in spirits and human ghosts in particular longer than there have been Homo sapiens on this earth. Because we have found evidence of funeral rites performed by Homo neanderthalis. We have found cave paintings that suggest belief in a larger spiritual world. I'm certainly not trying to use this as proof that these things exist, but the belief is clearly quite ancient.
Yeah, but so my point is, I'm willing to put the ghosts and whatnot outside of what we're defining as magical thinking. Where I think would be interesting to discuss is, where is the line between religious belief and magical thinking? There are many people that believe sincerely that they have, like, say, a guardian angel following them around, helping them in their everyday life or doing things, or that, to go maybe even a little more controversial, the general belief that God has a huge plan that is infinite and complex, and everything that happens is part of that plan and therefore working towards some bigger goal. I kind of wonder, like, is that magical thinking, or is that something different, do you think?
I'd argue that it depends, because I believe both of those things, but I don't necessarily think the way that I personally believe in them fall into magical thinking. Because first, when I believe, yes, I believe that there are guardian angels watching over us. I think the majority of things they help protect us against are spiritual. I don't think they get involved in people's day-to-day life often. That isn't to say it doesn't happen. But there are the weird coincidences. There are those times you just have a feeling and act on it, and it saves your life or saves you inconvenience. And I think those could be considered your guardian angel, and they might not. But I think a lot of it comes down to how do you act on that belief. Now, I believe that I have a guardian angel who protects me. That does not mean I am going to run out into traffic expecting the guardian angel is going to keep me safe. And that sounds silly, but there are people that go that far.
Yeah.
I believe God has a plan for me. I believe God has a plan for you. It's a discussion I had with an atheist who's a friend of the show. We've had on a couple of times, Cyrus the Skeptic. We had it over his comments of, he has a view, atheists in general, and he in particular, have a view of, there is no divine plan for your life. You need to go find the thing that you want to do and the thing you're passionate about and care about, and that's what you should do with your life.
Yeah.
I would argue that, God has something he wants you to do for your life. That thing that you're passionate about and that you care about, that your life has been building towards, in a sense, for many people, the reason that's there is because it's what God wants you to do with your life. It's not go pray and fast in a corner and try and figure out what God wants. It's that trust that unless you're doing something that's hurting people, that if you're doing something that brings you joy and brings you contentment and makes your world a better place, it's what God wants.
Yeah.
Which in practical terms is a lot like the atheist view, except I think God has a hand in it as opposed to God doesn't.
Yeah.
But again, there are people that take it too far.
Fair, but yeah, it's one of those things where you can't prove or disprove it. So it's a safe kind of thing where I take issue and where I tend to argue with that view is the idea that every single thing that happens in the world and to you and that you do is preordained and has been mapped out and is part of some cosmic, chess game. And for
the record, I agree with you.
I can't buy.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that view. I never have. I agree with you completely. I think God has a general, especially because in my view, I am very much a believer that God gives people free will. And if the universe is planned out to that extent, you don't have free will.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no such thing.
I think you have free will. So that, to me, logically precludes the idea that everything that, I hate the statement, everything happens to you for a reason. I think sometimes the reason, I think I'll put it like this. Maybe everything happens for a reason, and sometimes the reason it happened is you did something stupid. Or somebody else did something stupid.
Yeah.
It isn't God. It's
just random chance happened and it fell out that way. I mean,
Teresa Hall brings up a really good point of how this kind of thing goes too far, which is snake handling churches that aren't far from her. If believing that snakes won't bite you if you're holy enough, I see that as magical thinking. No way am I playing with rattlesnake. I agree with you completely, Teresa. And the point, and I've made this to the people that have those views before, sadly it falls on deaf ears, is the Bible says, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Jesus, when Satan says to Jesus, throw yourself, he takes him up to really tall mountain, throw yourself down for his angel, it is written that his angels will, save you. Jesus looks at him and goes, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. To me, that's a really clear, don't do, aside from the Bible does say you can tread on serpents and things like that, and the poison will not hurt you. Aside from, I think that's metaphorical, not literal.
Yeah.
Because serpents and things like that are associated with demons. I think there's also the reality of you're not supposed to just go out and test it to prove how great my faith is that I can let this rattlesnake bite me.
Yeah. Or even
drink
worse.
This poison.
Even worse, you got the people like the Christian Scientists and whatnot that won't consent to like medicine and whatnot, and just believe that, if we pray hard enough, it's God's will whether this person lives or dies. It's like, well, no, because, doctors and all that exist for a reason.
I feel like I need to step up for Christian Science here, as much as I generally disagree with them. And that folks I've talked to that were part of Christian Science, well, I have actually defended it as most of them aren't actually that crazy.
Well,
that's like the extremist end of it. But they're more, as I understand it, and I may be wrong, I'm not an expert on Christian Science, more of what their argument is, and I personally don't take issue with, is if you're sick, go ahead and go to the doctor, but say a prayer as well. It's like it's bringing faith into the equation, not cutting everything else out of the equation. And I think purely on a psychological level, I think there are benefits to doing that. Whether you believe in God or not, it can bring you comfort. It can help rally your spirits if you're feeling low. It can help bring people together.
Yeah.
Again, none of these require God to exist, but there are benefits. I will also say, in defense of the general idea, our society over-medicates in a lot of ways, and we're paying a price for it. Which is not to say, for anyone who listens to this, I don't want you to misunderstand me. If get the vaccine, take them. If you're got an infection, go to the doctors and get some antibiotics. I am not saying to go chase natural remedies or alternative medicine or anything of that nature.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going too far to say that big pharma plays maybe a little too large a role in our life nowadays.
No doubt, although that's not my entire point either. There's also the way that people look at things. A simple piece of health advice that doctors are free to correct me on, but as far as I know, is actually pretty good advice. If you have a headache, like a mild headache, I'm not talking about migraines, but the headaches we all get every day, all the time. Instead of reaching for aspirin, drink a glass of water. Because one of the most common causes of headaches is dehydration. And again, I'm not saying that if you have a really terrible headache or the water doesn't help, don't take aspirin. I'm just saying maybe just try a glass of water first. And in general, people should probably drink more water.
Yeah. Well,
and doctors will tell you to drink more water. It's like, there are people, one of the ones that always drives me crazy, and you've seen this meme, I've seen this meme. Thankfully, I think I more often seen people arguing against this meme as a meme, but the whole, this is not an antidepressant with a picture of a bunch of pills. This is then a picture of nature.
Oh, yeah.
And this whole idea, if you're depressed, go for a walk, go out in nature, do all these various other natural remedies. And I will never, ever tell somebody not to go for a walk. There's lots of proven medical benefits to getting some healthy exercise, meditation, and things like that. Sure. But for fuck's sakes, take the medication.
Yeah. And also there's a difference, and I think this is what people or those people that push that kind of idea misunderstand. There is situational depression where, I'm having a crummy day. I feel kind of crappy. Sure, go for a walk in nature. It probably will cheer you up. Play with a puppy, whatever. If if that's the issue, if it's a temporary transient thing, absolutely doing so. You don't need to take you don't need to take a pill for something like that. When someone has the condition of depression, which is a chemical and heart
It's a biological issue. It's not
a
just
bunch of
you're
crap
feeling
going
down.
wrong in the brain. There's a lot of reasons for it, a lot of side effects. That is not something that you can cure with a walk. I mean, you can have every reason to be happy. I mean, you look at like certain celebrities, beautiful wife, kids, successful career, life, all this great stuff. 2 days before I'm thinking here of I think Chris Cornell. Like 2 days before, he was having a great concert. He had a vacation with his family. 2 days later, he commits suicide. There's no good explanation for that, other than just something deeply wrong with the brain, and that does require medication in a lot of cases
Yes, absolutely.
to address.
And also, here's the thing: I would say, and I think you agree with me, and I think most mental health professionals would agree with me. Absolutely, positively, nothing at all says that if you're on antidepressants, you can't go cuddle a puppy
Yeah,
or
exactly.
go for a walk.
You should do both.
I was going to say, yeah, any qualified, competent mental health professional will tell you to do both.
Yeah. Usually you almost always try some form of therapy in addition to medication.
Yes.
It's rare that you just are handed a bottle of pills and said, and say good luck. Like that you're almost always having a multi-pronged attack.
I think, like I said, we over medicate. It's like and this is talking about you've got a headache and you load up on aspirin instead of taking a drink or taking a nap, or minor day-to-day things solved by minor over-the-counter drugs. Though it's worth pointing out, and this is one of the reasons I'm harping on the over-medication point. Tylenol is an over-the-counter drug. It can still have some fairly serious side effects. There are other solutions to pain that are worth exploring that may have less serious side effects. They may not work for you. But again, if we're talking about, I stubbed my toe, it hurts a little, or I haven't drank anything today and I'm a little dehydrated and I have a headache, maybe look at other options.
Sure.
Anyway, so yes, prescription medication is an exemption.
So we went into religion. That I have a controversial opinion that I've been waiting to share on the magical thinking, and I think it'll be an interesting spur for a conversation.
Land on me.
All right. I believe that we make, as a culture, at least in America and elsewhere, we make a big mistake with our kids with stuff like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, because to me, it seems like we spend the first, 6-7 years of their life filling kids' heads with all of this like magical, realism. Oh, these magical creatures are out there and they do this and they do that. And then gets to a certain point and you turn around and you start telling the kid, hey, grow up, stop acting like a child, stop believing in that stupid bullshit. It's like, well, you're the one that lied to them in the first place and filled their head with this kind of pattern of thinking. And I wonder if that's a potential problem. But
that's an interesting point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I don't agree with you, and I think it makes a more interesting show when we have something we don't agree with.
Yeah, sure.
I
was hoping maybe there'd be some controversy.
I think you have a point to a degree, but I think it's all in the presentation. My experience of Santa Claus is a little different than other people's, and I think the way my parents handled it, which was not directly originally because of they were doing it specifically for me. It's because I have a sister 2 years younger than me. I was never flat out told that Santa Claus didn't exist. You know what happened instead? I figured out that, wait, this doesn't make any bloody sense.
Yeah.
You know, as you get older and as your brain matures and you learn more about science, it should occur to you logically that Santa Claus doesn't exist. And when you say that to your parents, they should embrace it and help you think it through and realize you're right. My parents did it this way because, again, my sister was 2 years younger than me. When I figured out Santa Claus didn't exist, she still was at an age where it was fairly normal to believe in Santa Claus. So they didn't want me spoiling it for the younger sibling. But they also did tell me, you're right, Santa Claus doesn't exist. Now, please don't say this because we don't want you to ruin it for your sister. That, I think, was good. So I think the telling kids about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny can be turned into a early lesson in critical thinking by letting them figure it out for themselves and then encouraging them when they do.
I guess I can't help but wonder, like, don't you sort of feel lied to at a point? Like when you realize that all those years that you kind of started to question, but your parents doubled down on it and insisted, oh, no, Santa's real. I mean, to me, it's like,
for a start, I wouldn't be that inclined to keep telling the kids Santa's not real when they start seriously questioning. And just, that's, if the kid's actually asking the questions and starting to figure it out, probably time to come clean, in my opinion. Although I'm not here to tell people how to parent their kids. This is my personal opinion.
Yeah, I just think, to me, like, if I had kids, and granted, I'm not a parent either.
Yeah.
But if I had kids, I think my approach would be just none of that from the beginning. I would just tell them, yeah, we go out, me and your mom go out and buy these presents for you because we love you, and Christmas is a time of, blah, 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 and Santa Claus is, a symbol of the holiday. He is a mascot for Christmas. That is what he is.
So the problem I see with doing that is you're going to wind up ostracizing your kid from other children who are going to make fun of them and treat them badly as a kid up to a certain age, as a kid who doesn't believe in Santa, because that's not normal. And it's a tightrope to walk between that, and here's the other thing. I think it's good for kids to have that sense of wonder, that sense of the supernatural, of the impossible, and to gradually realize the world that they live in on their own, as an exercise in critical thinking.
Yeah,
I mean, certainly there is a point where if they aren't getting it, it's probably time to fill them in. But especially a young child, I'm more inclined to let them believe the pretty lie. And I think it's better to let them believe the pretty lie than the ugly reality.
I mean, I've heard that argument. I guess my only counter is I wonder if that's where so much of the magical thinking comes from, is because we do encourage that sort of fantasy and as play and as wonderment is in a child. We love it and we respond to it and think that it's adorable and innocent, so we encourage it. But I wonder if that doesn't lead to later in life that sort of thought pattern where that magical thinking continues and holds on, and we end up with some of the problems with religion that we talked to in the last thing, where they just transfer over, the magical thinking from one thing to another.
You have a point, and it's certainly something that my brain is processing. I mean, this is definitely more of a discussion than either of us trying to win points. But what about the magical beings that children tend to believe in that don't take parental influence? Imaginary friends. You can have kids who will start spontaneously on their own without their parents suggesting the idea, talking to people that seemingly don't exist, being afraid of the creature that hides in the closet or under the bed. And that is a fundamental part of growing up. There seems to be, and I've seen some studies that would agree with this, an inherent part of the human mind that has this feeling of the other. We tend to label that other by a variety of names: God, angel, demon, boogeyman, Santa Claus. But there seems to be a psychological need in children, at the very least, or at least most children. There may be exceptions. The sense that there is something out there other than themselves, their parents and themselves, that has an influence on their life. And I think if you don't shape it to a degree by encouraging that belief in the imaginary friend, or at least humoring that idea of the monster under the bed, or telling them there is a Santa Claus, it's going to find its own source. They're not going to just grow up an atheist, figuratively speaking. The other point, an example I would give to demonstrate my point, is there is a tribe in South America. Let me look it up so I get the name right. And these people are really fascinating, in my opinion. Most people seem to find them very interesting. But they're a primitive tribe in South America. There's a book about them called Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes. And it was written not by anthropologist or sociologist or anything like that. It was written by a Christian missionary, a former Christian missionary, because he went to South America. Paraha, that's the name of it. He met this tribe called the Paraha, and they don't have any concept of God, to the point that when he first started talking to them about Jesus, they were interested, until they found out that he had never met Jesus. And then they just found the whole idea ridiculous. How can you believe in someone you've never seen, that you've never met? He also agonized a great deal because, while he was working with them, his mother died. And they actually made fun of him for mourning his loss. Because again, if the person isn't there, if you don't have a direct interaction with the person, they're not real. And they've famously, and in many YouTube videos, been described as the atheist tribe. And it's shocking. This guy actually went from being a Christian missionary to now he's an atheist. Because he found this primitive tribe that didn't have religion. But I did some research because I found this idea really fascinating.
Yeah.
And very confusing. And it turns out it's more complicated than that. They don't seem to have a belief in creator deities, like a god that created the universe or anything like that. But they do have a belief in what seem to be spirits. There's a story you can find online of somebody who was with a bunch of them all standing on the beach or in the forest near the beach. And the Praha could all see a man standing on the beach quite clearly that none of the outsiders saw. What it seems to me, from what I understand, and my understanding admittedly is limited, it's animism. It's this idea of forces of nature personified, not true atheism. Technically speaking, they don't believe in God or gods, so you could argue that they're atheists. But you also might be looking at the formations of, like, how religions form out of this sense of a supernatural other that gets given, associated with various traits and various abilities, and eventually generations down the line might be God, seen as what we'd call a god.
Yeah. No, I'm actually more fascinated by the idea of just that way of thinking of, like, it's almost like how a baby doesn't have object permanence.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost like that. Like if it's not there and you can't show it to me, it doesn't exist, or I don't believe it. It's like
Or at least it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah, it's not relevant. It doesn't matter. It's like, wow, that's just psychologically, that's odd for a group of any kind of society or group of humans.
It is I loathe the use of the word, but it's the official word that we have for it. For a primitive tribe like that, there is kind of a practical reality of if you need to survive in the day-to-day, your cousin who's living 3,000 miles away in the city doesn't matter. Because he's not going to bring you a fish to eat when you're hungry.
Oh, I mean, that's fair. I just mean psychological. It's like,
but it is so fascinating.
As you mentioned, even the Neanderthals seem to have a spirituality and a religion, and that obviously they mourned their dead and all of that. So,
which is also usually a sign of religious belief, belief in an afterlife at the very least.
Right. So to have none of that is really interesting.
It is. It's like it's one of the million subjects in the world that it's like this is really fascinating, and given enough time, I want to research it more. But there is so much to learn in so little time.
Yeah, that's why being a vampire is so attractive. at least for somebody that's strongly intellectually curious and just really wants to learn. Just imagine having the potential of centuries to learn anything you want.
Right, that to me would raise interesting questions about. And it depends on both the folklore and the source. If you're talking about fiction, how much vampires are carriers of disease? Because the other people I'd really love to learn more about, but wouldn't go anywhere near because I don't want to wipe them out by accident, is the people from the North Sentinel Island. You know about them?
I think you've probably talked about them before, but I don't have the specifics on the tip of my mind.
So North Sentinel Island is an island off the coast of India. It has inhabitants that, as far as we can tell, live in basically probably around Stone Age level technology that have not had contact with the outside world in something like 10,000 years.
Oh, okay. Those guys.
Yeah. And we can't go visit them and find out about their culture for two reasons. One is that every time anyone has ever landed on the island or come close to the island, they'll land there with a boat, they get attacked. The natives seem to be very xenophobic. They shoot arrows at boats, even at low-flying helicopters. And people have been hurt and even killed before. But which is one of the reasons that the island is, stay the frack away from this place with the Indian government.
Yeah.
The other and more practical reason is they don't want a repeat of what happened to the indigenous Americans, where if you and I just showed up there tomorrow with nothing but good intentions, we might still wipe them out because we might be carrying some disease that our great grandfathers built up an immunity to, that because they haven't had contact with the outside world might wipe them all out without even trying.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the Europeans deliberately tried to spread those diseases by handing out like this smallpox blankets.
Yeah.
But you can also do it purely by accident. And that's the big thing that everybody's worried about. They don't want to kill off this entire unique group of people while just trying to learn more about them.
Yeah, which is fair.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly support that. It's like, if I was a vampire and I could be absolutely sure I was sterile and not carrying any diseases, I'm making a freaking beeline for that island because I want to learn more about them. And I will buy, because of course we know all vampires are rich, I will buy a private helicopter to land myself for long periods of time each day, because of course vampires aren't actually killed by sunlight, and then fly back to the mainland to drink blood to survive, so that I don't have to, so I can learn about them without hurting their culture. But that's a wonderful pipe dream that isn't going to happen.
No.
But it's like, and that's the thing. I think And here's the other part of magical thinking I want to get into that we talked about briefly before we started.
Okay.
Because needless to say, I get accused of promoting superstition and things like that with being a ghost hunter. And there's a serious concern, and it's a concern in the paranormal community as well, I might add, that by telling people their house is haunted, you can further someone's delusions. And that is a legitimate concern, and trust me, it's something I concern myself with. But I've been doing some research on that, and the opinion in the psychological community isn't as simple as you'd think it is. For example, as I was saying before the show, if a psychiatrist was talking to a Haitian, someone who came from Haiti, who spent their whole life in Haiti, who was steeped in that culture, who truly believed that they had been cursed, their answer isn't, okay, let's convince you that you're delusional and you aren't actually cursed. You send them to the bloody witch doctor and get the curse broken. If someone is part of a culture that believes it's a demonic possession, sometimes the solution is an exorcism. There are psychological reasons why they feel that's that way, but there's an idea you hear a lot called meeting people where they're at, and the reality is, someone in crisis, mental health crisis or otherwise, isn't likely to listen to "you're just crazy."
No, nobody wants to hear that. Everybody has these beliefs for a reason, so you have to at least try to meet them part of the way there.
And sometimes the solution is, is also one of the reasons, although the main reasons is I don't believe it's true, but a lot of people will tell you, oh, if you have a ghost, if you have an evil spirit in your house, if you have a demon, that there's no hope for you, that there's no solution. I don't believe that's true, and I think that in this mindset it's very dangerous, because if what they're dealing with is a psychological issue, you might be telling them that they have no hope and nothing's ever going to make it better, which could push somebody into a suicidal point, which is not what anyone wants. But there is a reality of, there seems to be a psychological benefit to prayer. There seems to be a psychological benefit to exorcism in some circumstances, to curse breaking and other magical rituals in certain circumstances. You can argue, and I think there's validity in the argument, that what you're dealing with is just a placebo effect. But placebo effect is actually can be pretty significant in specific circumstances. No one will ever give you a placebo that will cure your cancer. That isn't how that works. But pain management, placebos are actually very good for, because pain is a very subjective experience. And my experience of, my tolerance for pain is not your tolerance for pain, let alone somebody else's tolerance for pain. And by by playing the mind game and getting somebody to see that the magic feather, as it were, is making the pain go away, the pain just goes away, because you're not registering it the same way anymore.
There's definitely value in that.
And I think that's the situation with a lot of these things. It's like, and here's the other thing in the way that I approach things, in the way that other competent investigators approach things, in my opinion. There's a distinction to be made. If somebody is hearing footsteps in the hallway at night, they might have a ghost. The house might be settling. They might be mentally ill. If I'm sitting in someone's living room and a dinner plate from the kitchen goes flying past my head with no physical force acting on it, that's not psychological. Generally speaking, before I label something needing exorcism, I need something pretty darn, exorcisms of places are one thing, but exorcisms of people in particular, it's like something pretty darn extreme is going to happen before I declare this, this person is possessed. And I think a lot of atheists, a lot of non-believers would say that those things never happen, and reasonable minds can disagree. I'll put it like this, Brian. As someone who is generally a non-believer, if you went into somebody's house blind, didn't know anything about what was going on, and dinner plates started flying across the room without wires, and without somebody throwing them, are you going to sit there thinking, well, maybe I'm delusional, or are you going to get me on the phone?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not. I am not crazy. My skepticism comes from the fact that I have never personally witnessed,
Which is perfectly fair,
supernatural or paranormal occurrence. As soon as it happens, I go from skeptic to to believer. As soon as I see something like that, yeah, I'm a rational person. I'm not so married to my beliefs or whatever that I'm going to deny objective reality.
I would argue that there are, and I'm not going to point fingers at any single specific person, but partly because of one of the show's long-standing mottos of "we don't do that," and partly because I don't know of anyone for sure I could say it of. Although there are people I might hazard a guess, but again, I'm not going there. But there are atheists out there that would duck and dodge and run out the door and say the house wasn't haunted, but never go back there.
Yeah.
There are some people that are as latched on, and there are actually psychological studies that back this up. But there are people that are latched on to their belief that the supernatural doesn't exist, to the extent that some of the most ardent believers are latched on to the idea that it does. And neither extreme is healthy, in my opinion. The logical position is, I'll believe it when I see it. Like you said, it's like you don't believe because you have no first-hand experience. But if it happens, you're going to change your mind.
Yeah, I'm also open to the possibility that it could be real. So because like as I said at the beginning, there's so many of these stories out there. There's so many people that swear that they have had these experiences and these encounters, and they really don't have any particularly good reason to lie and make this stuff up. I mean, a few people could, but not everybody. So obviously I'm willing to believe that there's something going on that's causing some of this. It's just a matter of not knowing what that is and being open.
Which is also a fair approach.
Yeah, different explanation. If somebody comes up with a scientific explanation and says, no, this form of wave or particle or whatever is what is causing these phenomenon that appear as ghosts. Okay.
It's not scientific insofar as it's proven, but there is actually an explanation for ghosts that doesn't require the existence of spirits. That still acknowledges that something outside of what we understand is going on. Because I've had this discussion before and been extremely annoyed by atheists I've had an atheist tell me that you can't explain ghosts without invoking souls and spirits and bringing religion into the mix, and that's simply not true. And I explained this hypothesis from parapsychology, and then they went, yeah, but there's no proof for that. I didn't say there was any proof for it. I said it's an explanation that doesn't require the existence of the soul or God. They're two different criteria.
Yeah.
The hypothesis is what's commonly called the stone tape theory. The stone tape theory proposes that emotions carry as yet undiscovered form of energy. Under certain conditions, emotionally charged event, the energy of an emotionally charged event can become trapped in the environment, particularly granite, because granite has high quartz crystal content, and stone tape. And then when certain conditions are met, one of the most common being an electrical storm and correlations, there's a whole side chapter of ghost experience involving them appearing during thunderstorms. I've never seen it myself, but from what I understand, it's some of the most dramatic manifestations you'll ever see, and the room usually smells like ozone afterwards. But whenever certain conditions are met, the energy plays back events. And particularly sensitive people may pick up on it, or people in general may pick up on it. This would, for example, explain why we're in a house where the husband murdered the wife after finding out about an affair. You hear the front door slam open, somebody run up the stairs, you hear a woman scream, and then you hear a gunshot, and then feet go down the stairs and out the door and slam the door again without any visible thing happening over and over and over again. At the same time, every night, the night that the one guy murdered his wife because she was having an affair.
Right.
There's no intelligence behind what's going on. There's no soul. It's just, for those of us who were old enough to remember, a VHS recording or a DVD, as it were, of a series of events. This would also, for example, explain why you see ghosts pass through walls. Well, sometimes, they keep walking through this one wall. Well, if you look at the floor plan of the house from 100 years ago, the wall wasn't there. So just following the pattern it did on the night of the event, and it doesn't act like a wall that wasn't there then exists because it's not part of the recording. So, Palermo asked an interesting question. Do Ouija boards exist in the Star Wars universe? One of her favorite what's the name? A litmus test for people ever played around with a Ouija board. I don't, as I've talked about many times on the show, I don't judge Ouija boards with a 100-foot pole. I've known too many people who've had really bad experiences with them, and cleaned up too many messes caused by them. Although, to answer the other part of the question, as far as I know, there's no Ouija board in the Star Wars universe. Ghosts in that universe don't really work that way.
You could contact Force ghosts.
Yeah, but the Force ghosts don't usually seem to need the help.
Yeah.
How about you, Brian? I'm curious. Have you ever played with a Ouija board?
Yes. Back teenage years, did the usual playing around.
I'll admit I haven't done it in 20 years, but yeah, I've used the one when I was younger.
Yeah, my experience was really weird. Although, later a friend of mine later confessed that it was, not that it was him, screwing around with me. But we instead of claiming to be like a spirit or anything that we contacted, the message on the other side seemed to be claiming to be my future reincarnated self in the future talking.
That's a new one on me.
Yeah. And it always stuck with me because at least it was kind of original and different. I was like, anybody can say that they're a ghost, but to be like, no, reincarnation is real. And not only that, I'm you in a future life, 100 years in the future. I'm like, well, that's different.
Of course, you see, now this is all just making me think of the most terrifying true Ouija board story of all time, in which people were playing with the board and it started to spell out a message. WEARETRYING. Can you guess where I'm going yet? So instead of spelling it out, which will take too long, we are trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. Now that's a scary idea.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Demonic fraud.
Yeah, I was having trouble following you because I'm bad with spelling things audibly. But yeah, trying to reach you about the cars. Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah, that's a good example. Teresa Hall commenting, my best friend was possessed by a native, and the local medicine man had to come. He broke the board and lectured all of them. That's enough for Teresa. Yeah. Misha, because she's in the chat as well, commented on that. I know her story of the last time she tried to use a board, which, yeah, I know a lot of stories of people using those damn boards. I don't know of any positive stories of people using those boards. And the vast majority, for the record, the vast majority of the time, in my expert, as such as it is, opinion, when people use the board, somebody's pushing the damn thing.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, if you're using a Ouija board, even by yourself, you might be pushing it and not know it.
Yeah.
Because there's a real phenomenon called idiomotor effect, where your muscles are moving outside of your conscious control. This is why pendulums spin around. This is what moves Ouija boards around the board. And the vast majority of time, that's what's really going on. Which is why, if you're using a Ouija board, my suggestion would be to stop. But your experience is probably not demonic or ghostly or anything else. You're messing with yourself, or somebody else is messing with you, and you don't even realize it because it's not. Again, it is a subconscious effect, not something you're under control of.
Yeah,
and I think that's
skeptical of the whole Ouija board thing, but
which is good. And we're coming up to the end of our time because the stream is going to be cut out. So I do have one more thought I want to add, and I'll give you a chance to do so, and then we'll sign out. And my thought on the subject is this. It's never a good idea to dismiss something just because it doesn't fit your worldview. As the great bard said, there are more things in heaven and earth. That said, use your brain. For God's sakes, use your brain. Even if you're in a haunted house, not everything is a ghost. If you're alone at night at 3 a.m, you hear a dog barking outside. Yeah, maybe hypothetically it could be a hellhound chasing you, or a stray dog might be loose in your neighborhood. Don't jump to the ghost when there's a simpler explanation. When your table is 3 feet off the floor and nothing's holding it up, okay, yeah, now maybe you're dealing with a ghost or worse. But there's a lot of things that have a simpler explanation, and it's better to start with a simpler explanation. Brian, what would you like to add as a closing thought?
I would just say that in general, a little bit of magical thinking is not necessarily a bad thing. People believing occasionally in luck or, chance, whatever, destiny, fate, that kind of larger scale stuff. But, I really wish people would cut it back a little bit and be a little more rational.
Skeptical?
Rational about just the everyday working of the world. It's like God doesn't care whether you find your car keys or not. Like, praying about that, I don't think is going to help you. But,
it might help you psychologically, but I agree.
If that's what you got to do, then that's fine. But yeah, people that just live their lives like that, I just think is, becoming a problem.
I 100% agree with you, particularly just because of one of the most insulting things I think that people is there are so many people out there who will ignore the fact there are children starving, or that there are worms that are literally devouring people's eyes from the inside of their skull in parts of the world. And God isn't doing anything about that, but you think he's going to help you find your car keys?
Yeah, exactly.
Is God that petty? But I think we're going to wrap it for here. Folks, we are working on guests in the very near future. I think it's fair to say, without revealing who it's going to be, because we're still working on the whole guest list, but we are the big surprise I've alluded to a couple of times is that we are putting together a panel of folks to talk about vampires. We have a couple of people who write vampire fiction. And we have at least one person who is a folklorist on the subject. Teresa, that's unfortunate. Teresa Hall just asked about my book on the witch trials. I'm slightly chagrined to say that's still on the back burner by virtue of the fact that starting Wednesday of this week, I start my last semester of college before I get my 2-year degree. So I've been kind of more focused on that than on doing the research I need to do. I am planning on getting back on that soon.
Yeah, I'm trying to help with that, Teresa.
Yeah, Brian is trying to help, but there's still the reality of I'm paying to go to college.
Yeah.
That's more me, and I need to pass my classes, so that takes a higher priority. But we do have the vampire panel coming soon. We're going to be having most, maybe all, ideally all, I'd rather have all of the people on it individually as well to talk to them about their own work. We got some other guests we're working on, but that's going to do it for tonight, folks. If you like the show, if you want to support what we're doing, please consider giving us a like, a comment, a subscribe. Please consider, if you have a little bit of money to throw our way, going to our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, patreon.com/demonology. My email is also down in the description. If you have a question you're embarrassed and don't want to ask in chat, or you're watching this later and you don't want to ask it in the public comments, feel free to email me. I don't bite, or at least I've had all my shots.